111 PGA Tour players just issued a coordinated boycott threat, and this isn't some overblown headline for clicks. It's the biggest player revolt professional golf has seen in over 4 decades. The tour's new CEO slashed the number of fully exempt cards from 125 down to 100, and now more than half the tour is pushing back. Honestly, my first reaction was pure frustration. Regular fans are paying $100 just to walk a public course on the weekend, saving up for new irons. Meanwhile, millionaire athletes are threatening to walk away because their guaranteed starts might drop from 25 events to 15. On the surface, it looks like spoiled rich guys throwing a tantrum. But once you look past the anger, you realize these 111 players aren't fighting over egos, they are fighting for their careers. This isn't about pace of play or a smoother television product. It's a calculated shift of risk, moved off the tour's books and dumped straight onto the players who make up the working middle class of professional golf. Let me walk you through exactly how this happened, and there's a decent chance your favorite player is already on that list. I'll be upfront. I think these players have a legitimate case, but I want to know what you think. So drop your take in the comments, and if you want the real story behind where golf is headed next, subscribe now because you won't want to miss what's coming. So let's go back to the start. Because to understand why over 100 players are willing to risk everything, you need to see what actually happened inside PGA Tour headquarters earlier this year. A new CEO arrived in early 2026, someone who came from the NFL rather than from golf, and he wasted no time making changes. Some looked minor at first glance. Others were massive. Together, they built toward a breaking point for more than 100 players. The first blow landed hard. Starting in 2026, fully exempt tour cards dropped from 125 to 100. 25 spots disappeared overnight. 25 players who had status one morning woke up without it the next. 25 families whose entire year suddenly had no schedule to plan around. The tour's official reasoning was that smaller fields mean faster rounds and a better broadcast product. Reasonable enough, on paper. But Lucas Glover wasn't buying it, and when he spoke, the locker room listened. Glover is 43, a U.S. Open champion from 2009, and a veteran of nearly 2 decades on tour. He doesn't rattle easily. But this time he went public, calling the tour's explanation insulting to the players' intelligence. He said what everyone already suspected quietly, that the pace of play excuse was just that, an excuse. The real motive was something else. He didn't spell it out, but the players understood. This wasn't about faster rounds. It was about shrinking the tour into something smaller and more exclusive. Matt Fitzpatrick backed him almost immediately. The 2022 U.S. Open champion isn't known for outbursts, but he called it pathetic that pace of play gets blamed every year while nothing changes, and now it's being used to cut 25 livelihoods. His support mattered because it showed this wasn't just an American issue or a veteran's grievance. It touched every player on tour. Then a second bombshell landed. The USGA and the I&A announced that starting in 2028, professional golfers will play a ball that flies significantly shorter, up to 20 yards in some cases, supposedly to protect classic course designs from being overpowered. Justin Thomas called the rollback selfish, comparing it to lengthening a marathon course so times don't improve, or raising the basketball hoop because players jump higher than they used to. Bryson DeChambeau, who rebuilt his entire body and swing around generating distance, called it the most atrocious, uninspiring thing you could do to the sport. Coming from someone who treats golf like an engineering problem, that kind of raw language said a lot. But not everyone agreed. Rory McIlroy publicly supported the rollback, arguing it barely affects the average golfer and puts the sport on a more sustainable path. Suddenly, the biggest names in golf were publicly split, and fans were left confused watching stars argue with each other in real time. Here's the part almost nobody talked about. The tour also shrank field sizes. Full events dropping from 156 players to 144, smaller events cut from 132 to 120, and their flagship players' championship trimmed to 120. 12 or so fewer spots per event doesn't sound like much until you realize those spots belong to guys ranked outside the top 100, the ones scraping by on Monday qualifiers. Those qualifying spots are shrinking too, meaning a player who once had 4 or 5 shots a season at grabbing one now might get 2. This is the middle class of professional golf, guys ranked roughly 101st to 125th. No private jets, no eight-figure endorsement deals. Just grinders showing up Thursday morning hoping to make a cut and keep their season alive. A player finishing around 130th might earn near $400,000 a year, but after paying a caddy's base salary, a swing coach, travel, and taxes, he's keeping maybe a third of that. Take away 5 guaranteed starts, and that math collapses fast. One conversation turned into 10, then 50, then a number nobody expected, 111 signed players. PGA Tour players are independent contractors, not unionized like the NFL or NBA, so they can't strike in the traditional sense. But they can coordinate. They could refuse to play certain events, leaving sponsors staring at half-empty fields. They could go silent, no interviews, no press conferences. They could even move toward forming an official players' association with real bargaining power. This isn't unprecedented either. Back in the early 90s, players once threatened to skip events over how prize money was distributed, and that pressure alone forced real changes to how purses were split. History shows that when players unite, tours listen. Right now, the PGA Tour faces a choice: negotiate a real compromise, offer a partial fix, or dig in and risk the boycott actually happening heading into the 2027 season. If it does happen, fans lose the most: thinner leaderboards, weaker broadcasts, and networks paying 9 figures for star power that simply isn't there. So here's my honest read. These players aren't choosing between a good option and a bad one. They are choosing between bad and worse, and that's not a fair position for anyone. But that's just my take. Do you think this boycott threat is justified, or are these players overreacting? Tell me in the comments. Because the more this conversation grows, the harder it becomes for the tour to ignore it. And if you want to know what happens when the 2027 season actually begins, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this story is far from finished.